I was 10 years old when I found out I couldn't have children. While other kids were on the playground or at after-school activities, I was at the gynecologist's office, having genital exams, CAT scans, MRIs, blood drawn. I found out I was born without a uterus, and inside my body, I have testicles instead of ovaries. My doctors told me that I have XY chromosomes and that my body can't process testosterone. If you need a second to take that in, imagine what it would feel like to learn that about yourself at age 10. It was a lot, and it didn't end there. My doctors told me that unless I removed my testes, I'd probably get cancer. I didn't know it at the time, but this was something I'd hear over and over and over again from many different doctors over the next 20 years. What I never heard from them is that I'm intersex. Intersex is a word that describes people like me who don't fit the typical definition of male or female. People who are born with differences in their chromosomes, gonads, ovaries, testes, internal organs, external organs, hormones. The list goes on and on. There are over 30 different ways somebody could be intersex. But my doctors never told me any of that. Instead, they told me that I had a rare medical disorder, that I'd never meet anybody else like me, and that I shouldn't talk about it. I should keep it a secret. I think they were trying to protect me from being bullied. At age 12, we learned about bodies in health class, and my teacher told us that girls had XX chromosomes and boys had XY. I knew I was XY, so that day I came home crying, and I yelled at my mom because she had never told me I was a boy. It made me feel like I couldn't trust people with information about my body, so like any millennial preteen, I turned to my best friend, the internet. It was a terrible idea. I only had the language doctors had given me, which means at age 12, I was looking up sex disorders online. Don't try that at home, please. The internet wasn't what it is today, and I only found a few articles and forums talking about people like me, and it was so negative. Everything made me out to be this gruesome, hideous creature, not human, not good. I cried for hours that night, and I didn't understand how this body I was born in could be so terrible. At age 14, I was hanging out with some girls from my dance troupe, and one of them had just gone to the gynecologist for the first time. She was telling us all about it, and they were so cool. They were older than me. I wanted to impress them, so I started bragging about how I had already been to the gynecologist loads of times already. It was a low point. I learned in that process that if I tell people about the good things, maybe they wouldn't have to find out about the bad. At age 15, I kissed a boy for the first time, went on my first date, but then I would have nightmares about what would happen when I told him my secret. I had this fantasy all worked out in my head that we'd fall in love and he'd propose, and that's when I'd tell him the truth. And every time in my head that I told him the truth about my body, he broke up with me. I rarely ever told boys my secret. I just couldn't risk what would happen if they found out. And telling girls was hard enough as it was. At age 17, I told a friend of mine, or I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and her boyfriend, when my secret came up. And it turned out she had already told him everything without my consent or knowledge. And I felt so betrayed. This was my deepest, darkest shame, my most personal secret, and I had trusted her with it. And it felt like I couldn't trust anybody, but I was a teenager, and that didn't last long. A couple months later, I told another friend, and she started crying and told me that if it was her, that she would kill herself. I comforted her and cried with her, gave her a hug. I understood. She didn't have to tell me I was worthless. That summer, I turned 18 and went to yet another gynecologist. And this one told me that unless she operated on my vagina, I would never be able to have sex. This was a couple weeks before I went out to college, moved hundreds of miles away from home, and I was so overwhelmed by everything going on that I decided to postpone the operation. This turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made because I later learned that she was completely wrong. It wasn't true at all. But because she didn't understand my body, because it was different, to her that meant it was broken and she needed to fix it. This wasn't the first time that had happened. All the doctors who told me that I would get cancer unless I removed my testes, that was a lie too. Or it was unintentionally a lie. They didn't understand my body. To them, it was broken, it was wrong, it was different, and they wanted to fix it. But I now know that my risk of testicular cancer is lower than the risk of breast cancer in a typical XX woman with no predisposition, no family history. But they never understood my body. In college, I had a doctor present to my class about transgender issues, and I approached her afterwards and asked if she knew about my intersex variation. When she said yes, I started crying because for the first time in my life, I met a doctor who understood my body in college. When I called to make an appointment, she was booked out for months, but I knew it would be worth the wait. And in the meantime, I started dating the perfect guy. He was sweet and funny and nice and creative. I knew he was the one. But when I told him my secret, he broke up with me. Coincidentally, 5 days later was my appointment with that doctor, 5 days after the breakup. And I was a mess, needless to say. But when I walked into her office, I was surprised because she didn't ask me to strip down and put on one of those scratchy paper dressing gowns. A genital exam was a standard procedure for me anytime I saw a new doctor. And so when I asked her about it, she was confused, and her words still hit me in the gut. She said, "No, you have androgen sensitivity syndrome," the term they used to describe my body. "I know everything I need to know." And it was in that moment that I realized all of the genital exams I had were completely unnecessary. How violating that was, how absurd it was that my first instinct when entering a doctor's office is to get undressed. How maybe going to the gynecologist wasn't something to brag about at age 14. Or ever, really, if we're being honest. She didn't know for sure about me getting cancer, and so she wanted me to explore my options. I still wasn't sure. And so she referred me to two people, a therapist and a surgeon. When the day for my surgical consultation came, I got to his office, went into the room, and he performed a genital exam. My recent revelation hadn't sunk in yet, so it was still standard procedure. I didn't question it. It wasn't until I was getting dressed afterwards that I realized this was the doctor who would be removing my testes, which are inside my abdomen, nowhere near my vagina. And I realized he was doing a genital exam. He was exploring, touching, looking at my genitals just for his own curiosity. Every intersex person has stories like these. But unfortunately, most intersex people aren't as lucky as I am to have escaped all the unnecessary medical interventions. These surgeries and practices cause intersex people lifelong consequences. pain, scarring, inside and out, emotionally, physically, for no medical reason at all. These surgeries are entirely unnecessary, and this experience with the doctor was unnecessary. But fortunately, I was seeing the therapist that the doctor had referred me to, and she suggested I meet up with other intersex people. So the next summer, I flew across the country, and for the first time in my life, 13 years since finding out I was intersex, I met other people like me. And not just a few people, but hundreds. It turns out, despite most of us being told that we're the only ones or that we won't meet other people, intersex people represent around 2% of the population. That's around 150 million people worldwide. And we all have similar experiences with doctors, shame, loneliness, pain. I thought back to that time I was 12 and looking up sex disorders online, hoping somebody would be talking about my body positively. And looking around, I was surrounded by so many beautiful, incredible, inspiring, healthy people, and I didn't understand it. If my body was broken, that didn't make sense, because that would mean the millions of people all over the world would be broken too. So 1 year later, I did the only thing you naturally can do when things need to change, and I came out publicly on MTV. You know, it's what you do, I guess. At the time, I was working with Interact, the leading organization here in the US that fights for the rights of intersex kids. And we worked to develop the first ever intersex main character on television. It was groundbreaking. Being able to see yourself, your story, represented in the media, to know you're not alone or have something that you can show other people, to validate who you are or to explain what it might be like to live in your shoes, it's life-changing. Since then, it's been 5 years, and I've been using the media and speaking to raise awareness about intersex issues, to fight for intersex rights and visibility. And can I just say that I'm tired? I am. It's exhausting. When you tell somebody you're gay or vegetarian, people usually know what that is. When I say I'm intersex, that takes at least 20 minutes and a drink or two. Not sure if the drink's for me or them. Probably both. And when you've spent half your life ashamed, hiding this deep, dark secret, telling the whole world is still scary. Even today, there's this voice in the back of my head saying, don't do this. People aren't going to like you. You'll get hurt. But how many more intersex kids have to get hurt before things start to change? Before the rest of the world realizes that we don't need to be fixed? The idea that difference automatically means bad is what's truly scary to me. Our society is so afraid of people who are different than each other, than one another, than ourselves, that we shame or shun anyone who doesn't fit our definition of normal. This leads to doctors lying to families, parents choosing cosmetic surgery on their infants' genitalia, and intersex people spending their entire lives sometimes not talking to another person about their life, their story, their body. It's scary to me, and it's taught me that the only thing that truly needs to be fixed is the way we treat people who are different from us. We can do better. Thanks.